Hello there, and welcome to the Palm and Pine Podcast. The boys are coming to you from their hidden camp, set deep in the Florida woods on the banks of the mystic Swanee River. So let's take a moment and hear from the boys of old Florida.
All right, welcome to the podcast. Chris Jones, what's going on, Chris?
How you doing there, Steve?
All right, we're glad to have you, man. Glad to have you. You're actually guest number one.
Guest number one.
So I was kind of looking at it. We did our episode 1. This episode 2. We pre-recording this, so it's just kind of a guesstimate, but we probably got it upwards of 10 to 12 followers by now. So no pressure, right?
You get there.
Yeah. So I called you, Chris, and I talked to you before. I was like, it's important to me, and I know it's important to you and Doug that, we want to kind of record some of the things that we saw growing up. We're old men now, and we want to kind of remember some of those things and, maybe contrast and compare to some of the stuff that's happening now, and just kind of, talk about Chiefland history, local history, and then Florida history. But anything else as well, and any funny stories we can remember, that we've had happen to us along the way. And I know you got some of those for us too. But and you're the mayor of Chiefland.
Yes.
So yeah, I didn't know if you'd be wearing a sash.
You won't get to see that. That won't be happening.
Or anything like that. But how long have you been mayor, Chris?
I've been in a political position since I believe 2013. I think in the mayor's seat, probably 5 or 6 years. Don't remember exactly, but elderly lady who was actually friends with my mom, Betty Walker, she passed away, and that's when I ended up going to that position and have maintained it since that point.
So that's kind of, you kind of got voluntold? Is that kind of how that
Actually, during that time, we only have a committee of 5 commissioners, and the commissioners are the ones who actually make the vote as far as who takes the seat of the mayor. The public makes the
So how much you got to pay them, Chris?
Who's that? You're talking about sunshine on violation.
Oh, yeah. We will edit that out.
No, just I've been in that position for a while, and it's got the good and the bad. It's got its high points. It's got its low points, but I definitely enjoy, being able to serve a community right where I grew up.
The pay being one of the low points.
Oh yeah.
Now, me being somewhat uneducated on civic matters, can anybody just come in there and come to a meeting and get a moment to talk and address you guys?
Sure. I mean, that's it's open to the public just like any other typical government forum. The only time we have closed doors meeting would be, let's say, like if we're doing a negotiation for the PBA, like dealing with the police and stuff.
Okay.
That's the only time, but any other time it's just doors open to the public.
So anybody come up in there and gripe and complain?
Yeah, good thing we don't have too many complaints. It's not too bad around here. I'd say probably the biggest episodes in Chiefland of my recollection was I was a proponent for pushing the alcohol sales on Sunday, and so now I will admit Chiefland did not want to let that one go.
Wow.
But believe it or not, I think it worked out for the better because it's brought a few new businesses into the town, and so that was actually something we need, and that's kind of, I think, hurt the town for quite a while. But and that was opening up Pandora's box. Nobody ever wanted to bring that one up, but I definitely brought it up, and it acquired the quite a few members of your church there. First Baptist came out. But however, most of them I knew on a personal level, and
So yeah, Southern Baptist, Doug and I grew up in Southern Baptist Church, and we're still recovering. But Baptist a little tighter, they a little tight, and but I've heard, they kind of like everything's gotten more liberal, right? And I've heard now that they'll even wave at each other in liquor stores. Wow. But so I can imagine you want to bring in the liquor on Sunday. I can imagine that'd be controversial.
It definitely was during the time, but it passed. And like I say, it opened up some doors for us. I'm trying to think of maybe another big one that we had, but In fact, this one kind of involves an area, down by Long Pond. Had a gentleman that's came in.
Yeah.
He's wanting to develop that area also. What his
Swampland.
exactly over a 50-year period, he's wanting to do that, and that was one of the statements. Like everybody was kind of, hey, this guy's going to come in and fill up our swamp with lime rock. However, that's definitely not going to be the case because that area is actually you being a biologist, I know you're aware that that's Manistee Springs water basin. This right down there where that property is. And so with that being said, I don't think in this day and time you're going to be able to get away with, doing anything that's going to harm the environment or nothing to that effect. But hopefully, he does it in a manner, like I said, it's over a 50-year period. So, but there's going to be some houses, some businesses, and I think any business that comes to town is a necessity for this area because, I was one of them. I was living in Trenton at the time, and I would drive every day to school over in Gainesville. So, we got the Jack Wilkerson College right here in your backyard over here. Yeah, so that's been a good thing for Chiefland. I never would have imagined that when me and you were in school.
Lord,
so
no,
that was definitely
now they just need some students there again.
exactly.
I tell you something that happened the other day for me. When we were little kids, these were just what you'd call a single track sand road to get back in here. The school bus couldn't even come all the way.
No, it gets stuck.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
And I remember, being in the car with my parents and watching the dog fennel bushes get knocked down as we're driving. There was nobody else living here. And the other day, I'm coming out right there by the mailbox, Doug, and a car comes by with a Domino's delivery.
Coming
thing.
That's something, right?
And I gotta admit, I was just flabbergasted, like Domino's deliverers, back here. I mean, you wouldn't have never dreamed, that was.
No, heck no.
So it just hey, you got to put out Red Bull. See, Red Bull ain't a sponsor. You got them wings on. But yeah, that's crazy how much it's changed.
I grew up initially right up in town on 4th Street, and during that time, times have just definitely changed. Chiefland's still a small town, but still it's kind of changed with the times. Probably my first recollection of you was probably, if we're just going to take you way back, was when we were playing ball for good old Cinchen Logging Supply, if you remember that.
Andy Cinchen Logging.
Yep. In fact, their old building,
baseball.
Yep, his old building's still out there for 27, where he sold his chainsaws and logging equipment. In fact, that road goes down to another historical thing, which is the Quilt Museum, was on that same road also.
Right.
But those are different times, because I can remember during that time, you don't even see it like that now, but right here at Chiefland alone had enough kids playing baseball. You don't have kids interested in sport of that nature now like they used to be, but I can remember probably had, I'd say 6, if not 7 towns that were right here from town. If I remember correctly, like Cinchen Logging Supply, White Ford had a team.
There were a lot of kids back then.
Oh, yeah.
We were younger people back then.
Yeah, it has definitely changed, Doug. You see a kid nowadays, it's kind of odd. They got that phone in their hand.
Oh, yeah.
That's their whole gist.
Yeah.
In fact, I got on my kid one time, this is years ago, but he was in the house playing a video game, and in that particular video game, it was like a street car racing video game, and he's in there, got this car, he's adding all these accessories to it. And I said, dude, there's a real one out there in the garage. It was a WS6 Trans Am.
Change, son.
Yeah, exactly. So, he had never showed no desire to work or mess with that real one, but I was in there on a video game and showing. Just speaking of things that's changed over time, I look at, when we were kids in high school, it was nothing for a kid to have your weapon, long arms, out in a truck. And I look now, these morons, you'd hate to see them taking a gun to school nowadays. But however, it was nothing, if hunting season was going on, about every kid that hunt had an old beat up pickup truck that had maybe a gun and a rifle and a shotgun stuck in the back window. That was common around here. And I can never remember an incident with that.
I can remember being in the parking lot at school, and Coach McCall, who was the principal, I think, at the time, he would walk up to my vehicle and look and be like, "Oh, Steve, is that a 30-06? He'd want to know about what type of rifle I got." but it was understood it was for hunting, and it wasn't, nobody was going to shoot anybody. And, that's a whole other thing we could say for another podcast. But, that transformation, I don't know what happened. I really don't, where we went from that to where we are now. And I guess that's part of being old. I just can't understand it, right?
Yeah, it's definitely changed. That's all I can say. Like I say, I can remember very well, with the weapons and hunting in this area.
Now you're also a businessman yourself, and as I understand, you're an expert mechanic of street bikes. You build engines for racing street bikes.
Yeah.
How'd you come about to do that? I mean, you would have to learn about that from somebody in a small town.
I'll be frank with you on that. When I was a kid, my mom, she always used to tell me, she says, if you ever move out the country, I'll get you a dirt bike. So I spent many years there reading through Cycle World, Dirt Rider, or whatever the magazine of choice. She had no problem with buying them 4 or 5 magazines a month there for me to read. But when it came time to buy an actual bike, it was a little different story there. She had a big fear of bikes.
So magazines had an influence on you. That was like the internet back then.
Yeah, of course. Got, during our era, man, I can remember being the dumb kid that just went out, had the bicycle, set up the garbage cans, and go pretend you're Evel Knievel. So definitely went through that era of crashing bicycles and getting stitches, along the way, learning the foundation of it. But finally, when we moved out there to the country, I finally did get a bike. Actually, to be honest with you, my dad bought it from my brother there. My brother was supposed to pay for it, but let's just say that didn't happen. So that bike being at the house, I always rode. Actually, it was a 3-wheeler. It was the first one that was around, and I rode the wheels off of that thing. And actually on the weekends, my brother, whose bike it, I guess officially was, but he would come pick me up on the weekends when he was going to school at Florida State, and we'd go race. And actually, my mom never even knew I was racing for probably about a year until I came home, couldn't hardly walk, hadn't hurt my back there from an accident. So
you were dirt bike racing at first.
Oh yeah,
right. Okay.
Yeah.
So what were your first kind of dirt bikes?
The first actual motorized vehicle that I had other than a go-kart was what was so popular in this area during that time was I had an ATC 200X, which was Honda's like kind of sport 3-wheeler, unlike the big reds and all that stuff. Those are the ones you'd see commonly most around here, but I had the 200Xs and the 250Rs, which were the competition style bikes is what they were. And that's kind of what opened the door for me, and then got into street bikes. And same thing there, won't lie, we were illegal street racing. We'd go, man, it was nothing for us to have.
When did you start working on the engines? Did you have someone that taught you that, or are you self-taught?
Believe it or not, Doug, I actually had, I guess from reading so much, prior to even owning one, I had understood the theory and how the stuff functioned before I even own one, just simply from reading those magazines. And that stuff used to intrigue me, just how internal combustion motor functions. So I had a pretty good background before I ever even touched one, at least for, say, the technical side of it. And so when I did finally got a bike, and at that point, along with all that reading, you're watching like these professional guys and the modifications and stuff they were doing. So I was simply just mimicking what they were doing. And you learn along the way, you blow crap up and fix it and move on. And, pretty soon you got it figured out. And that's what any form of motorsports or even baseball, football, you just keep practicing it till you kind of go on.
You got into, and I'm ignorant on this subject, but you got into drag racing, right, of motorcycles. So
the drag racing thing, during that time, I was actually working for Fish and Wildlife, which was kind of a horrible combination to have a government job and you're out street racing all over the place in Florida there. So that probably wasn't a good idea at the time. But when you're in your 20s, you don't think things through. You just enjoy life. But however, it was actually me and all of us had bikes during that time, at least 15 or 20 of us that had street bikes. And probably me and Shelton Bowers are probably the ones that clashed the most. He always had fast bikes and I did too. So we kind of honed our skills racing against each other here locally. And then we would used to go out, they call it Turkey Town. You know where Turkey Town is. We'd go out there and race on Sundays. And even then, that was a different era. We went out there and done what we had to do and got from out there. We weren't posting it on, well, there wasn't a YouTube then, but we weren't exactly trying to draw attention to ourselves by no means. We were trying to go out there and get it over with. But that's what got me into street racing. And then as the bike started getting faster, at that point, I reached the point where we started going to the racetrack. And just like anything else, was just that learning curve. Started practicing, going fast. And then at that point, I wanted to try on a professional level. And my first year was a good year. But it was a learning lesson. I found out at that point, not only do you got to win a race, you got to win several before you make it to the final. So I had this thing where I wasn't checking my bike over, and I can remember making a million trips to other states, even as far as Norwalk, Ohio. One year we were number one qualifier and went out the first round because a simple pin came out of the air shifter on our bike, which is what pulls the bike in gear. You don't shift those things with your hand, it's on a button. But anyway, after that long drive, that whole year was a learning curve. And when we came back the next year, I think everything went entirely different. We started winning races and, started sending letters out to companies for sponsorship. And I think in 2009, we were sponsored by WPS, which is a parts distributor. Then we picked up help from Shinko Tires. So, just kind of time and everything was perfect. In that year of the 9 races in that series that we attended more than 9 races, but from the series we were in, which is AMA drag bike during that time, I think we won 7 of those 9 races. Wow. The first 2, everybody's your friend. And after we started winning religiously, we kind of found out we didn't have too many friends at that point. So.
But then they wanted you to build their bike.
Well,
we need to close with a funny story.
Yeah.
So Craigslist killer, that's not a good one.
No, I'll tell you that story. It's crazy. Yeah. Steve, I hadn't asked Marlon about that. Turn this stupid phone off. I hadn't asked Marlon about that to know what's going on with that. It's probably over. He never did talk much about it. What happened, Doug? There's a guy over in Ocala, in a nutshell. Guy over in Ocala had up an ad for a Mustang for sale. Because I remember now they told me the Mustang never even existed. They get to the guy's place to buy this Mustang.
And it's a buddy of yours or y'all?
This is Marlon. That's Marlon and another guy together. I don't remember his name, but Bunk's son.
So is this like in the Ocala forest, kind of in the edge of Ocala?
In fact, it's in Forest. That's one of those towns out there off of State Road 40.
State Road 40. Okay.
State Road 40. But yeah, they ended up going out to look at this Mustang. And like I said, the Mustang wasn't there. It was all a fake.
The ad just to lure people in.
And supposedly, here's the gist of it. The guy ended up stabbing Marlon's friend, I guess, when he walks back there for the money or whatever. Marlon's in the truck on the phone, playing with his phone or whatever. But from where he's telling me about it, time had passed, and then he rolls around the corner, walks out there in the yard and sees his buddy on the ground. And about that point, old boy runs up, and Marlon actually is able to pull his gun, I guess, from the way he explained it to me. He ends up shooting him, but it wasn't fatal. It actually, some kind of way, he caught him in the gut and went in and out of him. And long story short, he said he has no cell service out there, so they're trying to call 911 to get the cops there, which was, they ended up leaving the scene to go to a store, I guess, or somewhere to get a signal, and coming back. And just to summarize it all, when the cops came there, obviously knew this boy, and loose cannon crazy dude, but when they started probing the property, I know it was at least a man and a woman, and it might have been more, but they ended up digging up. And there was this same ad that he had used. He had killed another couple who came there basically with the cash money. So, really this Mustang never did even exist.
Oh, so he would kill him and keep the money.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so that's what the whole deal was. But he had 2 country boys who wasn't having that.
Yeah, he got the wrong customers. Apparently.
Yeah.
So watch out about your Craigslist ads. If they're too good to be true, they're fake. Well, that's great. Yeah, well, it's just been wonderful to have this chat with you.
Yeah.
And Steve's going to ask you a question that we ask of all of our guests.
What's that?
Yeah, the closing question, Chris, and we're gonna get a lot of people smarter than me on here. So Doug and I try to learn, trying to develop ourselves, and mature. But one thing I'd like to ask you is just share with us, like, what's maybe the best guiding principle that's helped you throughout your life, let's just say you could go back in time and you could meet 18-year-old Chris, and you could say one thing to him that could shape and mold and guide that young person's life. What would that be?
This probably sounds cliche or like real simple answer, but I guess, when you say like go back and meet 18-year-old Chris, at that point, I guess my brain was probably in left field during that time. I wanted to be a rock star or something like that, running across the world playing music, and that's a whole different story in itself. But your mindset changes as years go by, and I'd say this sounds real cliche, but kind of the way I go through life is I definitely believe in a higher power, but I don't get hung up in the differences of religion because I've studied religion with several different people. I grew up just like you did in a church. It was AME, which is a Methodist church, and I went to a variety of churches over the years, and and even done study with Jehovah's Witness and so on. But however, my most fundamental part of life, is just to treat someone, exactly how you would want to be treated. And as you get older, that you kind of value things differently. I mean, I don't have any regrets of how I've ever done anybody, but that's probably my most simplistic thing that I say, especially like you say too, there's times I've had to set my kids straight because, the millennial generation, they're pretty unfiltered, so I've set him straight, and that's what I told him, like, man, I don't care what you do for a living, but, or whatever, but, make something of yourself, and treat people just like you want to be treated. And that's kind of my way of life, but, I tie that somewhat to, even the religious aspect of it, because I'll say I don't maintain any type of interest in any one religion or the other. I hate to say this, but my studies of religion has been more out of curiosity, but I definitely consider myself a person that believes in a higher power, because I think there's some examples in life that I've been through with accidents and health issues that I don't think it was the doctor that saved me. I think it wasn't my time to go, and divine intervention, or call it what you may, but I think there's a higher power that looks out for you. But my biggest thing is just treat someone how you want to be treated.
All right, we've enjoyed having you on the podcast.
Right.
Maybe you'll come back and we'll do it again.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming, and it's a blessing.
All right.
All right,
Thanks,
thank
Steve.
you. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode of the Palm and Pine podcast. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. The views and opinions expressed by the host or any guest are our own and do not necessarily reflect the views of any affiliates. Our opinions are just that, opinions, and are not legal or medical advice. But in our opinion, avoid lawyers and big pharma at all costs. Copyright 2025 Palm and Pine Podcast. All rights reserved. Please subscribe and share. Also, make sure to check out the video version on YouTube. The video version includes bonus content at the end you'll surely don't want to miss. If you have any ideas for future podcast episodes, or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out. We also ask for you to send pictures or any bonus content, and we'd be pleased to add it to the bonus content portion of an episode. Okay, until next time, keep it Florida, and we'll see you soon.